Okay, here we are. Final presentation for the end of the course. So I wanted to talk about LGBTQ identities, the internet, and social media. This is something that's been kind of coming up for me repeatedly throughout this course, just kind of in the back of my mind. So I wanted to do a little research on it and talk about identity as it relates to communicating through social media. So first of all, we know media doesn't exactly mean the same thing that it used to. There used to be really only these centralized types of media, so things like news and film, and then we made this switch to these more democratized types of communication, more democratized types of media, things like social media or YouTube content. So there's been this shift, and now we're in this modern era of social media and internet content. So we have applications like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And I think that this is revolutionary in terms of communicating identity because we're not relying on these big institutions to tell us who to be, to tell us who to emulate or how to act. We now have a little bit more power in our own hands. So when we talk about media representations of identity, I always want to start with a critical eye, of course, and I use these three questions to sort of give myself a framework for being critical, for being critical about what's being presented, what's being represented in any media form. So, number one, whose story is being told in this particular format, in this particular form of media? Secondly, who is telling that story? And third, how accurate is that story that's coming across? So these questions just sort of give us a place to start when we're watching a movie, when we're seeing something, when we're seeing an identity being represented. These questions give us that critical framework to sort of decipher what's happening there. With social media and internet content, queer folks don't have to wait for big media to tell their stories any longer. The internet and social media are full of resources, communities, and representations of all kinds of diverse queer people. So, to begin, I want to be really clear, of course, that social media is not all sunshine and rainbows. It is certainly a place where there are risks. We know that cyberbullying happens far more than it should. People use digital technology to bully others, to hurt others. There's a risk of invasion of your privacy. Of course, with kids, with teens, there's the potential that you might see something that's offensive, whether it's an image or a message. Generally speaking, there are always going to be people on the internet who are not there to help you, they're there to harm you. So particularly with communities that are at risk anyway, that are the targets of bullying because of their identity. So queer folks online and offline in the real world, they are targeted. So this is important to keep in mind, that we need to be always critical of any form of media, take the good with the bad, and continue to try to sort of avoid some of those risks, to try and stop some of those things from happening, to protect others and to protect yourself. So that's important to keep in mind. But let's talk about the good stuff. So according to research from Ohio State University, LGBTQ individuals use social media for education. And the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is education in the traditional sense. So folks might be getting online to get information about health aspects of their identity, or maybe relationship aspects. They're knowledge seeking, so they're really looking to learn things, facts, statistics, whatever that is that they're looking for. But then there's also the social learning aspect of social media, which is LGBTQ folks looking for role models, looking for people who are maybe like them, people who have similar experiences or lifestyles. And this is a social type of learning where they're watching behaviors, they're watching how people live life, and that allows them to learn in a different way. This isn't just facts or information seeking, this is actually learning behaviors, watching and observing behaviors. There's also an experiential type of learning. So social media, different applications allow queer folks to maybe experience dating for the first time in their unique way, in their unique form of dating. It provides them a platform to match with people who are like them, people who fit with their identity, and that has an experiential type of learning for them. And then lastly, social media provides a platform for folks to share their own stories and to be able to share their identities with other people who maybe aren't familiar with their type of lifestyle. So maybe for trans persons, this is maybe that's something that's not familiar to everyone. So they're able to put themselves out there and teach just by sharing their stories. Now, another aspect of social media, specifically for LGBTQ individuals, this study out of the University of Michigan explored a subset of LGBTQ folks, and that was parents. So these queer folks are navigating particularly complex circumstances because not only are they queer and they have that side of their identity, they're also parents. They're also trying to create a family, trying to raise children, and that sets up some unique circumstances, some unique stigma that they have to fight against based on stereotypes, how people see them, how people view their fitness as parents. So according to this study, queer parents use social media for a couple of really interesting things that I never would have considered social media to be used for. So first of all, these queer parents said that they use social media as a way to screen people in their social context. So maybe they would share, say that it's a transgender parent, and they would share something on social media about transgender rights and then wait to see what the reaction is. So friends, family then react to that content, and they're able to detect disapproval, and they're able to detect allies as well. So maybe they can find the support that they're looking for. Maybe they can decide that a person is not safe and not supportive, and not disclose certain information to them, not share as much of their life with that person because they're not going to be safe. So it's sort of this screening process, this informal screening process that they use social media for. And secondly, parents, queer parents use Facebook, Instagram, social media forums to advocate for LGBTQ folks. And the term that this study used was incidental advocates, because oftentimes it's not an intentional type of advocacy. They're just sharing information, sharing about their lives, and that becomes advocacy in a sense because of what they're sharing, sharing their lifestyle, sharing simply that they exist as a family, and it becomes this sort of advocacy for queer folks, for queer identities. So I wanted to just sort of take up a little case study here. This is a picture of vlogger, makeup artist, comedian Bretman Rock, and he, as you can see here, he's got tons of followers, subscribers, viewers on social media, and Bretman is openly gay. This is a picture of him on the cover of Gay Times. This is the Pride Month edition of 2019. And So Bretman is not a celebrity in the traditional sense. He went viral on YouTube and is now creating content for tons and tons of people. And I think what's powerful about Bretman's platform is that he's sort of just sharing little bits and pieces of his normal life. So he's open about his sexual identity, but that doesn't necessarily dominate the content that he creates. It's part of it, but he's just sharing his normal life. And I think that there is a special kind of advocacy that happens when we just get to see someone being themselves. They are a normal human being. They eat like us. They love like us. And so it kind of removes that otherness. Maybe gets rid of some of that. There can be a bit of fear if someone has a different identity than you or something that's unfamiliar. It kind of creates this barrier, this fear, this unfamiliarity. And I think that people who create content and simply share their lives, their normal day-to-day habits, it creates this sort of relationship between the viewer and the creator, and there's this sort of this familiarity that gets built over time. And I think that that's incredibly powerful. It calls back to that aspect of social learning, where we are observing someone's behaviors, we're seeing them live a lifestyle, seeing their experiences, and it creates sort of a friendship, if you will, this sort of relationship over social media, and creates that, it removes the fear in some sense of this otherness, something that we don't understand. It becomes something that's familiar, and I think that that's a really powerful aspect and tool of social media. So I want to go back to those 3 questions from the beginning. These 3 questions about identity representation, specifically with social media. So when we ask about social media, whose story is being told? Well, whoever decides to tell their story. And what's powerful about social media is that story that's being told is being told by the person who decided to share it. So they are sharing their own information, their own experience. And this means that when we come to question 3, how accurate is that story? It's exactly as accurate as they decide for it to be. Bretman, as an example, he chooses to share certain parts about his identity, and some parts he doesn't share, and the picture of himself presented is it's exactly how he decides. And so I think that that's an incredibly powerful aspect of social media, is that there is this control, this power that's given to those individuals. They're not waiting for someone else to tell their story, they're actually telling it themselves. The power of social media is in allowing people to tell their stories, allowing them to hear the stories of others, and thereby shape the queer community one post at a time.